It's kind of a good problem to have. Which talented young starter should be our fifth starter? It seems like the Dodgers made the choice, and that choice is Gavin Stone, which means Michael Grove is in a long relief role. We're going to dig into that, plus a lot more. So let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. So please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snyder. That guy next to me is my co-host, Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like a lot of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And Vince, hope you had a good weekend. I spent the weekend in Arizona with my son at a baseball tournament, and always fun to watch some baseball, and got to sneak over to Camelback Ranch. Unfortunately, I didn't get down there until after the big league team had already flown to Korea, but my boys and I got to go back on the backfields and watch some minor league action, got to see Dalton Rushing get hit by a pitch, and a lot of different fun stuff. Some of those guys, it was a lot of fun. My boys got a picture with Dalton Rushing. He's listed at 6'1". Seeing him next to my sons who are 6'3" and 5'9", I think he may be fudging by an inch or so, maybe. But yeah, he's a nice guy. It was fun for them to get a picture with him. And another guy we saw in action was Andre Lipsius in maybe potentially his last Dodger action, because he's been DFA'd again.
Yeah, but we mentioned the fact that could be a possibility last week, and this was the reality over the weekend.
Yeah, and being DFA doesn't necessarily mean he'll be leaving the organization. If he gets claimed by somebody, then he for sure will be. If not, then he could end up in AAA with the Dodgers, just not on the 40-man roster. It was kind of interesting that when they made room for Daniel Hudson, that they did go the route of DFAing Lipsius rather than putting Nick Frasso on the 60-day IL, which is an available move. Makes you wonder if they have something in mind for that roster spot, and maybe it's as simple as, somebody, eventually, somebody, you never know what you're going to need. And so maybe they just want to keep that open, but it does get you wondering at least.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it could be a matter of, they think Lipsius will clear this time because, everybody's starting to add guys to their roster, or are going to need add people to the 40-man roster in order to get them on opening day rosters. Or it could be just a matter of, maybe they appreciate Lipsius and they're like, hey, you know what, maybe you'll find your way somewhere else.
Yeah. So, but another interesting thing we discovered this weekend when the Dodgers played against the Heroes over in Korea, Michael Grove. Well, first Dave Roberts said that the bullpen was going to take down that whole game against the Kaiwoom Heroes. And then Michael Grove started that game, which, I took a logic class in college, and, that tells me that Michael Grove is part of the bullpen, which, is kind of what we were expecting. We've been talking about the fact that between Michael Grove and Gavin Stone, it seemed like Stone had maybe done a little bit more to earn that fifth starter spot that's opened up by Emmett Sheehan being on the injured list. But still, it does seem like this made it basically official, right? That Michael Grove is a reliever.
Yeah. And Michael Grove probably got a little glimpse of, if it doesn't work out in the US, I think I can go over to Korea and have myself a decent time there. So, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't officially reported. Fabian Ardaya said that, or some of the beat guys were basically just saying, it's a bullpen game. He's starting, going 2 innings. It looks like he's going to be a multi-inning reliever. That can safely assume that that's what the case is, and that's what makes sense. Gavin Stone outperformed him this spring. Gavin Stone is the better prospect in general. And all Michael Grove really had was that he had been in the majors longer than Gavin Stone at this point.
Yeah, and Grove also has experience being that long reliever that Stone doesn't, and so yeah, everything pointed to that. But Grove was impressive. His last start of the spring in Arizona, and then those 2 innings in Korea, the stuff is good. That slider is legit. It is, and what I'm hoping from these last 2 appearances is that he is kind of figuring out how best to attack guys with that slider, because he has the stuff to be a solid major league starter, and there are going to be other injuries, of course. And so, whether that is with the Dodgers or somebody else, he has that potential. He also has potential. There's a lot of value in a reliever who can go 2 or 3 innings, turn over the lineup one time, and be kind of dominant doing it. That's the role Josh Hader used to have with the Brewers before he became a 1 inning guy. He was that, go multiple innings, and just dominate for a couple innings. It's, obviously Michael Grove is a different pitcher than Josh Hader, but there's a lot of potential there. It's pretty exciting. I can honestly say that I am more excited about Michael Grove than maybe I've ever been. And maybe that says more about me, just that for some reason I've never been able to get super excited about him. But this stuff is good.
We saw it last year when he added, the new pitch, and he had that big game against the Yankees. He still gave up runs, but had a lot of strikeouts. And I think that's kind of the encapsulation of it is, okay, let's compress that a little bit, get those strikeouts, maybe not the runs. You're going to go in there, you're going to give us 2 innings at most. You're not going to go through the lineup the whole time. You can just use every pitch you need at your disposal for every hitter. And I think that's kind of where it lives best for him. Again, like I said, on a bad team, he could be a number 3, 4, 5 starter. On a team that has World Series aspirations, if he's in your starting rotation, there's a couple things that have gone wrong.
Yeah, although we saw last year, the Dodgers had guys who were probably quite a bit worse than Michael Grove is starting games for them last year at different times. Everybody brings something to the table, I guess. Lance Lynn did his job. He did exactly what the Dodgers needed, but right now I'd say Michael Grove was probably a better pitcher than Lance Lynn.
Yeah, well, that team, last year's team had a World Series aspirations, but not a World Series real roster, I guess, technically.
Yeah, with all the injuries and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so Gavin Stone, I'm excited for him. You guys know I'm a huge Gavin Stone fan. I'm really high on him, and like you said, Vince, he did have a really good spring. He's only a year removed from being one of the Dodgers' top prospects, and he did resolve the pitch tipping issue. And so, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I don't think I'd go so far as to make a bet on FanDuel about this, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Gavin Stone is an all-star this year.
Yeah, the Dodgers have had a long line of random all-stars the last few years. Not that Gavin Stone would be random, but in this season he would be random.
Yeah.
In the future, maybe not so much as Alex Wood and Ross Stripling and Tyler Anderson are probably random all-stars at this point.
Yeah. And when we were at Camelback, they have these signs with all the all-stars from each position for the Dodgers. And Dodgers have had a lot of pitchers make the all-star team. And like you said, a lot of guys, you're like, that guy was a Dodger and he was an all-star with the Dodgers. Like it's a long list of fun guys. And yeah, and like I said, I wouldn't necessarily predict an all-star appearance for Gavin Stone, but with the way this team is built, if he can put up a 3.3 ERA, he's probably going to win most of his starts. And, if he goes into July with, if he's 9-2 with a ERA just over 3, that'll get some consideration for sure. Maybe we'll probably do another bold prediction. I actually have a good bold prediction when we do that episode or that segment at some point. I thought of one the other day, so maybe I should have saved the Gavin Stone one, but only everydayers will know that it was a repeat, right? So we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about Kyle Hurt, who won't be in the starting rotation. Looks like he probably will be in the bullpen for the 2 games against the Padres. The question is there any chance he could be in the bullpen long-term? We're going to dig into that. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So if you have a hunch, in fact, you don't even need a hunch in the tournament. Awesome thing is there's 16 seeds against one seeds. And almost every time the one seed wins. Put your $5 bet on one of the one seeds. Boom, $200 in bonus bets when that one seed wins. Hopefully you're not the 1 in a million chance that the one seed gets upset. I think that's only happened once or twice. But your chances are pretty good to get your $200 bonus if you just bet on a one seed over a 16 seed. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Hey, we're back. Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. We especially want to thank our everydayers, those of you who are with us either on the podcast or on YouTube every weekday morning. We really appreciate you. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. If you are watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comment section. If you listen on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you through other means. We'll give you all that contact info at the end like we always do. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. It's a text message based service where we text back and forth with you. We send out blasts with our thoughts on different things. You can reply to us, have one-on-one conversations. There's been a lot going on. Vince is getting more involved with that lately, partly out of necessity. I was gone all weekend and Vince manned that a little bit, but it's a lot of fun chit-chatting with you guys. One of our insiders lives in St. George, Utah, and so I was driving past his freeway exit. So I took a picture and sent it to him, texted it to him through our Insiders Club, and just to let him know, hey, I'm near you, but I'm not going to stop and say hi. But so become an insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. Also, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network, covering the entire world of sports or the Los Angeles world of sports, whichever you prefer. And in the Los Angeles world of sports, our Dodgers are over in Korea. They played a game against the Heroes, as we mentioned. They dominated that game. What was the score? 13-3, something like that. It was a fun game. Freddie Freeman hit the ball hard a couple times, a home run, a double, and a deep fly out. He also had an infield single, basically the full Freddie experience. Shohei Ohtani swung hard a couple times and 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts. We talked about Michael Grove's performance. There was a lot of good there. Hunter Fiducia hit pretty well. He replaced Ohtani after Ohtani's 2 at-bats. Fiducia got up, 4 times probably? Maybe even 5, because I know Freddie Freeman batted 7 times. So, yeah, maybe Fiducia got up 5 times. And he had – I think he had 2 hits. Looked pretty good. It was fun to see him in a Dodgers uniform. Hopefully we'll see some of him this year. But maybe one of the most exciting was Kyle Hurt. He closed out the game, pitched the last 2 1/3, 2 2/3 innings, sometimes less than 3, more than 2 innings.
Yeah, 7 outs.
Yeah, 7 outs. So 2 1/3 innings. Looked really, really good. His changeup, you guys know I love changeups. It's one of the reasons I love Gavin Stone. Kyle Hurt's changeup is filthy. And Dave Roberts said that Kyle Hurt has a very good chance to be in the Dodgers bullpen for the 2 games against the Padres. Was it the Padres? It was the Padres that he pitched his only big league game against last year, right?
Mm-hmm. He
so
faced the big 3.
Yeah, so maybe he only faces the Padres. But so that makes sense that the Dodgers don't need 5 starters. So we knew that they were likely to carry an extra reliever, probably, especially when we saw that they weren't taking Andy Pages and then they did option Miguel Vargas. So it seems like they're not going with any extra position players, probably. I guess Fiducia is still an option if they want to have a 3rd catcher, but probably not. So they're probably just going to carry an extra reliever or 2 on the roster. And Kyle Hurt makes a lot of sense for that. But it's got me wonder, Vince, like, what do we think Hurt would have to do to make it a longer stay and say, hey, when we get back to LA on March 28th, how about I stay on the roster?
I don't know if there's anything he can do in Korea specifically, other than stay healthy and maybe other people aren't healthy. He's looked good over the entire spring. He has I think 6 innings pitched, 9 strikeouts, hasn't allowed much beyond, a couple hits here and there. If there was open competition for the bullpen, he would have pitched good and well enough to earn a spot. But the Dodgers do have a lot of guys, and one of those things that I am thinking, and I don't know, Ryan Brazier hasn't looked great this spring in more than a few appearances. If the Dodgers really wanted, maybe he has arm fatigue or something like that, and Cowherd that'd be a way to open up a door for Cowherd to be on the roster to start the season in America, not just in the Korean series. But I think it's one of those where I think the Dodgers have to just, well, I guess they don't have to, but for me, I would rather them decide, hey, you're a reliever now. You're going to work as a reliever, get ready to go back to back, 3 out of 4 days, stuff like that. Be prepared for a lot of different situations, because your way to help us this year and even in the next few years is going to be as a reliever. Realistically, a lot would have to happen for him to be a starting pitcher for the Dodgers, especially with Ohtani coming back next year and everything else they have going on. So I think the Dodgers should, make that move, whether it's multi-inning reliever or single-inning reliever, whatever. I think getting him on that cadence of, okay, I have to pitch back-to-back days, or, end an inning and then come back for another inning, or whatever else the case is. I think that benefits him, and I think that's his best way to get on this roster as in general.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because all the reports about him being on the roster for the Padres, probably they all say the Dodgers do still think of him as a starter long-term. And so maybe that is the biggest obstacle, because, and it's not insurmountable, because, plenty of guys start their big league careers in the bullpen and then convert back to starting. I don't know about for a full season. Like Walker Buehler came up in 2017 for a month and a half, and pitched out of the bullpen. And then he was a starter the next year. Chris Sale, I feel like he spent more time as a reliever. I should have pulled up his tab before I started talking about this, but I know that he started his career as a reliever, and it was, he didn't start a game until his 3rd season with the White Sox. So he pitched 79 games in relief between 2010 and 2011, and then became basically a full-time starter. They converted him after 2 pretty darn good seasons of relief, and they said, okay, now you are a starter. And he basically never pitched in relief again, one time since then, unless you count the World Series against the Dodgers. But it was, so Chris Sale is maybe would be the blueprint there of you are good enough to be in the big leagues right now. We don't have room for you in the rotation, but we could use a guy as good as you in our bullpen, and then, convert you to starting later. The question is,
Jordan Hicks, Reynaldo Lopez are trying to do that now. Go back to starter.
Yeah. And that's obviously harder to do after many years of, Reynaldo Lopez, maybe it's only been a couple of years that he's been a reliever. Yeah. Hicks has been a reliever most of his career. And
Seth
definitely
Lugo did it last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I guess the question would be, do the Dodgers think of Hurt as a reliever? Like, I know they're saying they think of him as a starter, but assuming they're thinking about him as a reliever too, is that because of something inherent in him? That do they think that his pitch mix and everything lends itself more to the bullpen, or is it just a matter of, their needs right now?
Yeah, and that's what we don't know. I don't think we've ever heard anyone kind of speak to that point. I think it's one of those, for me specifically, like I just said, he's going to help the team as a reliever right now. It would, kind of sucks for him in general. I'm sure he doesn't care necessarily too much. Hey, if I'm on the roster all year, but as a reliever, I'll take that instead of, maybe trying to be a starter and not quite making it or whatever the case is. But I think for him, the stuff plays up well in the bullpen. We've seen it. The stuff plays up well over a couple innings. We've seen that. We haven't seen it extended out in the majors, obviously, or even in spring training. He hasn't gone, more than a couple innings. He got 7 outs. He got the 2 innings last year in the major league. So I think it's one of those things where the Dodgers, at least for this year specifically, he's got to be a reliever. And if he can come back and if he doesn't win relief pitcher of the year, whatever this year, and he comes back next year and they want to try him out as a starter again, I think that's cool. But I think where the Dodgers are maybe trying to balance this is giving Kyle Hurt the chance to be a starter and giving Kyle Hurt a chance to help this Dodger team specifically this year. And I think they're going to have to go up the ladder at some point.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I'm looking at Chris Sale, a reliever for 2 years, and then for the next 7 years, he finished in the top 6 in the Cy Young voting, just immediately when they turned him into a starter. So 7 straight All-Star appearances, 7 straight top 6 finishes in the Cy Young voting. So, it's not a bad blueprint to follow. Obviously, there's some differences between Kyle Hurt and Chris Sale. But, I'm excited to see him hopefully, he'll probably only pitch in one, probably the second game against the Padres if he gets in a game, because he did throw, those 7 outs on Saturday. I don't even know what days to say. Saturday night for us. So get a few days rest before he goes out there again. And then we'll see, injuries happen. And if nothing else, he is definitely building up a resume that he's a guy the Dodgers can trust when somebody does get hurt. Say, okay, let's get Kyle Hurt up here when, if JP Fireeisen or Ryan Brazier or whoever needs a break on the IL, boom, let's get Kyle Hurt here. So we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to answer a couple questions from our Locked On Dodgers insiders that Vince didn't get to in his mailbag episode the other day. We'll talk about Dodgers possibly breaking records and maybe some guys who could have an impact who we haven't thought much about lately. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Hey, we're back. Thanks again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks to our everydayers especially. Please become an everydayer by watching or listening every weekday morning. Remember to become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. And be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 2 24/7 streaming channels over on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. And speaking of our Locked On Dodgers insiders, we have a couple questions from them that, we kind of keep these at the ready. A couple good questions you got at the end of last week that you didn't get to in Friday's episode. This one was, sure to make probably a lot of people mad, people who hate the Dodgers and people who worry about jinxing the Dodgers. But our buddy Namini on our insider group, he asked, what are the chances how likely is it the Dodgers will break the Mariners record from 2001 of 116 regular season wins this season? Vince, what do you think?
I don't think it's that likely. I think this team is very, very good, but I get the feeling like it's not going to be a steamroll, 110 wins, something like that. I'm thinking they're going to be around 100, 105 wins again, similar to where they've been last year and, kind of the average of the last few years, I guess. I think it's one of those where this team has a lot to learn about itself, new position, or some people are in new positions. Some people are in, new countries. Some people are on new teams. There's, a lot. And the thing of the matter is that the Dodgers aren't going for, they're never entering the season saying, oh, we want to win 117 games this year. And I think, not saying that the Mariners back then, also thought that, and the Yankees when they won 114 were thinking that going into the year, but it's one of those where the Dodgers have been good enough to make the playoffs the last 11 years and only have, the one title out of it. And I think they're playing for a different time. They're playing for October, whereas, the Mariners have never won a World Series, but they weren't, perennial postseason losses. They had a couple postseason losses here and there, but they were just playing very well. The Yankees are obviously a storied franchise and have a lot of World Series, and World Series is their what they're going for, not so much the wins. I think that's kind of where the Dodgers are at, where there's going to be times where Dave Roberts is playing, and we've seen it the last few years, where he's playing to see, okay, I want to see what this guy does in this situation because we might need this come October, and it might not work out, and then they lose that game, and then, you know, we'll be upset about it in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. I think there's going to be a handful of games like that. And again, we don't exactly know what's going to happen up the middle on defense right now, and that could potentially lead to, you know, a couple losses here and there too if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think I would ever bet on a team breaking a record like that. I do expect the Dodgers to be closer to 110 than to 100 wins. I think they're going to be very, very good. Honestly, I think I think they're the best team in baseball. And you know, I recognize all the arguments in favor of the Braves. I just don't see. I just don't see the Braves being quite as good as the Dodgers. But yeah, I mean, winning 117 games, it's almost. I mean, you think about when they won 111 2 years ago, and that was ridiculous. And you know, try being ridiculous +6. It's there's a reason that record sticks around. And also, it's worth remembering that those Mariners lost in the first round of the playoffs, you know, and Dodgers definitely don't want to emulate that. They've been there too. And so obviously there's nothing about setting a record that makes you more likely to lose. You know, when the Yankees won 114, they won the World Series. And so it's not like it's worse for you to be a better team. The Dodgers, I just want to be healthy in October. And so however many they win in the regular season, as long as it's enough to win the division and then to be healthy in October, that's all that really matters to me, I think.
Yeah.
Our other question that we want to jump into is from Josh. Oh, this is my buddy who lives in St. George, our insider who I texted the picture to. And he asks, who is a player that most Dodger fans haven't heard of right now who has a chance to be an important part of the team by the time the playoffs roll around?
Yeah, this question's hard to answer because if you go by people that listen to this podcast, those are different than, you know, majority of Dodger fans. I think Kyle Hurt would be a guy that you might name. If you're talking about the Dodger fan base as a whole, I don't know how many people know Kyle Hurt specifically. You know, everybody that's chronically online or in podcasts or whatever, they all know Kyle Hurt, and you know, we've talked about him for a couple years now on this podcast. So I think that would be my answer for like the general population of Dodger fans. I think if you go outside of that and you know, maybe somebody for real people haven't heard of, that's kind of tough. There's not a lot, at least on the 40-man roster. There's not a lot prospect wise. There's not as much that is kind of ready to go right now in terms of pitching. So it's kind of tough. You know, you think of guys like Andy Pages, who, again, if you are somebody who watches this podcast, you definitely know who Andy Pages is. I think maybe River Ryan might be that guy. He's kind of the next one in line of maybe most people don't know of in general Dodger fan base that could benefit him. But I do think the answer to this question realistically is they're not on the team or in the organization yet.
Yeah, it's I'd be very surprised if there's anybody who's currently in the organization who makes an impact this October who we haven't ever talked about on this show. But yeah, like you said, that's a different group probably than the average fan. And so I think Kyle Hurt's a good answer. River Ryan's a good answer. You know, when I think about, you know, obviously Dalton Rushing, if things, you know, it's not hard to envision a world where Dalton Rushing is in the big leagues by the end of the year. I wouldn't necessarily predict it, but if Will Smith were to get hurt, I don't think they roll with Austin Barnes as a starting catcher for very long. And, you know, maybe Hunter Fiducia, but if Dalton Rushing is, you know, say Will Smith gets hurt in June, and I'm not wishing this, I'm not hoping this is throwing out realm of possibilities. I love Will Smith, but if Will Smith got hurt in June and they knew he was going to be out for 2 months and Dalton Rushing was batting .330 with 500 slugging percentage in AAA, you know, he's probably coming up to replace Will Smith on the roster. And so if that were to happen, and then if he hit well in the big leagues, well, boom, he could be a guy. But Dalton Rushing is, in some publications, the Dodgers' top prospect, and so he's not an unknown guy, but he's not on the 40-man roster, and so it's there's probably, I think it's easy, like you said, for us to kind of get in our tunnel vision and think that everybody's heard of all the same guys we have, and the fact is it's probably a pretty high percentage of Dodger fans who have no idea who Dalton Rushing is. Maybe they've heard the name when he got drafted or, when he showed up on a prospect list, but would be surprised if he ended up being a starting catcher in the postseason.
Yeah, the one off the wall answer I'll throw real quick is Trey Sweeney. He's a shortstop the Dodgers got from the Yankees. If they unlock something in his swing, which was kind of the issue, he looked pretty decent in some of the spring action, hit the ball the opposite way a few times. If they can, kind of get something there, he has the defense, and he's already, I think he's 23, so he's already up and to the point where he could make an impact. That would be maybe an off the wall that a lot of us, we've heard of him, but maybe most people haven't.
And maybe along those same lines, maybe a guy like Drew Avans, if an outfielder was to get hurt and Avans got called up, because he's got a lot of tools. He's 29 or whatever. He's not going to ever be a superstar, but he could be a guy who ends up in the big leagues. And it could be, you always hear in the postseason, there's always some guy who, had his big moment. I was just listening to a podcast today talking about Herm Winningham with the bunt single in 1990 in the World Series, ended up scoring the winning run in Game 4 for the Reds to win the World Series. And that was a highlight of Herm Winningham's career. But if a Reds podcast had existed before the 1990 season, they might have thrown out Herm Winningham as the answer to this question. So I think that'll do it for us for today. It's nice to be back. I wasn't sure that I would be with you for this episode because I was driving all day on Sunday, but luckily my son's team lost early enough on Sunday morning that I was able to get in the car and make the drive back in time to do this podcast with you. So always fun. The Dodgers play. And by the time a lot of you will have listened to this, the Dodgers will have played, right, against Team Korea. That's tonight, right?
5 hours right now.
In a couple hours. Yeah. So I will be watching the replay at some point on Monday. I'm not getting I'll be up in the middle of the night for the games that matter, but I'll be watching a replay of this other one. But so it should be fun. And then we are only a couple days away from, realistically, a day and a half now away from the Dodgers season starting, and I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh yeah.
Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. We especially want to thank our everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, please become one. It's a lot of fun talking Dodgers with you, and we hope it's a lot of fun for you guys to listen to us. You can also become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSense91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog. Our DMs are open over there. You can also email us anytime you want, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.